Hi, and welcome to another one of my cyber security videos. Before I start, let me quickly tell you about my free guide called How to Get into Cybersecurity for Beginners, where I showcase my 5 must-know tips for anyone considering a career in cybersecurity. The link is in the description below. Okay, now let's get started. In this video, I'm going to talk to you through the normal process of interviewing for a cybersecurity job, and then the scenarios where only one interview is generally required. When I apply for jobs, I tend to go for those with only one interview required, as those where I have to be interviewed many times are just not worth it for me. So with the normal interviewing process, there's normally more than one interview required. There's normally a screening interview, and if a recruiting agency is involved, they may want to do an interview as well. Once the initial interview stages are complete, then the next interview is more than likely to be with the manager from the organisation who is hiring. After this interview, there may be interviews with the human resources people and maybe further interviews with senior management. On one of the cybersecurity roles I applied for a few years back, there were multiple interviews. After 7 interviews and still no decision being made, I gave up. They wanted me to do another 2 interviews, and I was just worn down by the process. As I was already working in a cybersecurity role, taking the time out to do the interviews ate into the time I had available, and there was a cost to consider too, as I had to take time out of my current job to get to the interview. I found it incredibly stressful trying to balance all of this, and this was why I became worn out and decided not to progress with the role any further. With so many interviews, all the different people involved weren't just interested in what my technical abilities were, but they were also interested in how I could fit into their organisation, including whether I could be a team player and how I dealt with issues and problems in the workplace. This is typical for the vast majority of jobs available in cybersecurity, where the hiring process can take a long time and can involve many interviews, as key people in an organisation hiring need to be sure whoever they are taking on is right for their organisation. They're looking for someone to join them on a permanent basis that could be there for many years, including right up to retirement, so they want to make sure they get the right person. Now that's normally how it's done, but there are other ways to be recruited, and that's what I've been doing for a number of years. I don't look for permanent positions. The ones I did do, though, a few years back were just to test the water, just to see if it still made sense to go permanent. It didn't, and whilst many would say I wasted my time with all the interviews, I would thoroughly disagree with that, as I put a niggling thought in my mind to bed by trying something instead of being niggled by it on an ongoing basis. I work as a contractor on a temporary basis, and recruitment for contract cybersecurity jobs is very different from permanent cybersecurity jobs. With contracting, it's different. Organizations have a problem and they need someone to fix it. So the problem could be they're getting too many calls to their cybersecurity operations center and don't have enough staff to deal with the number of calls. They know it's down to a new project being added into the monitoring for the Security Operations Center, and there are 2 new projects on the way that will be added in the next 6 months. So they need a temporary resource to come on board and help deal with the influx of calls and alerts. Hiring someone on a permanent basis doesn't make sense, as it's a temporary job, and in most countries, hiring a permanent person temporarily and then letting them go when the project is completed violates particular labour laws. When they interview someone for this job, they are only interested in how well they work in a cybersecurity operations center and what their skills are able to deal with the headache of increased calls. They would probably just interview someone once, and if they felt they were competent enough with the right skills and experience, they would make them an offer and take them on. Better still, if the person isn't already working or is not in a job with a long notice period, like contracting, makes a lot of sense and probably would be their best choice. My current contract role, I had 1 interview. The one before that and before that all had 1 interview, because they were all contract roles and the interviews were only half an hour long. They explained their security issues and I explained how I could help them fix them. I'd have to go back 3 years to a point where I had more than 1 interview for a role, and that was for a contract where the initial interview was by telephone and then the second interview was face to face with the manager and 2 of their key team members. So how does this help people who want to break into cybersecurity? Well, if you can build up some experience by learning some real cybersecurity skills, like how to use the security tool components in Amazon's AWS, Microsoft's Azure, or Google's cloud platform, then it may be easier to sell these skills in a contracting market than a permanent job market, as sometimes companies can get stuck to get people in for a contract role where skills are required quickly, meaning they may overlook some of the lacking experience a candidate may have. I had a friend with very little cybersecurity experience, but he'd been playing around with Microsoft Azure and learning about vulnerability management, which I initially thought was a strange choice for someone with very little security knowledge. But he said one of his other friends, who works in cybersecurity as well, told him this is what they did and that they thought this may be a good idea for them to kind of explore. So he set up a free Azure account and started to build a test virtual machine environment and trying out the vulnerability management aspects using Azure Security Center. He'd learned most of what to do from YouTube videos. His friend then introduced him to a recruiter who he had previously worked for before, as the recruiter had reached out to him asking him for someone with vulnerability management skills in Microsoft Azure. The recruiter was pretty desperate for someone to start on a Monday as a contractor, and it was already Friday. His friend passed on his details, there was a short telephone interview, and the job was theirs, all because they met a need that this vulnerability management job required. They had some skills from the time they'd spent learning in their own time, and they were prepared to go and work on a temporary basis as a contractor. So whilst not everyone will be fortunate as my friend was, there may be opportunities available. Even if you want to volunteer for an organisation just to build up experience, having some real experience, even though it's been self-taught, is still valid experience. Thanks for viewing this video. Don't forget I have a free guide called How to Get into Cybersecurity for Beginners, where I showcase my 5 must-know tips for anyone considering a career in cybersecurity. The link is in the description below. Till the next time.